So don't worry, this recording will be made available. Okay. Now listen. So this figure shows the 4 different cases. The first case is showing a single axle. That means at the front end and at the rear end, you are having only a single axle. And on each axle, you are having a single tire. The second figure is showing a single axle with dual tires. You are having a single axle at the rear end, and on each single axle, you will be having 2 tires. Third figure is showing tandem axle with single tires. That means there are axles at both rear and front end. There are axles, and sorry, it's not like rear and front end. At the rear end itself, you are having 2 axles. Okay, it's not like at the rear and front end. It was like at the back, at the rear end, you are having 2 axles, and on each axle, you are having single tires. So tandem axle with single tires. And last one is tandem axle with dual tires. There will be 2 axles, and on each axle, there will be 2 tires. Okay, so that's it. Next one is maximum wheel load. So for maximum wheel load, for highways, the maximum legal axle load specified by IRC is 8170 kilogram. Now let us see how the vertical stress is distributed. Let us see how the vertical stress is distributed for the different pavement layers. How vertical stress is distributed for the different pavement layers. This figure shows the vertical stress distribution. The x-axis shows vertical stress in kilogram per centimeter square, and the y-axis shows depth in centimeter. When you observe these curves, this first curve is showing 1.8 ton and 7 kilogram per centimeter square. That means the load is 1.8 ton and the vertical stress is 7 kilogram per centimeter square. So from this curve, you can get the pavement depth corresponding to each vertical stress. Similarly, from all these curves, you will be able to get the depth corresponding to one particular depth of pavement required corresponding to one particular vertical stress level. So that is the significance of this vertical stress distribution curve. Now continue. Whenever we are speaking about the tire pressure, the influence of tire pressure is predominating in the upper layers. There is no need of explanation for that point, because the upper layers will be directly subjected to the rubbing action due to the tire, right? The upper layer will be directly subjected to bending action, rubbing action due to the tire, so that the tire pressure will be predominant in the upper layers only. At greater depth, the effect of tire pressure diminishes, and total load exhibits a considerable influence on the vertical stress distribution. When you move on into the deeper layers, the effect of tire pressure is diminishing, and the total load will exhibit a considerable influence on the vertical stress distribution. Here you can see that when you are going on into the deeper layers, see, as the depth increases, the vertical stress is also getting reduced, because the effect due to tire pressure is getting reduced when you go on into the deeper layers. And as we reach the deeper layer, the effect will be produced due to the total load only, and not due to tire pressure alone. It will be due to total load only. Next thing which we have to study is the contact pressure. Contact pressure is given by, contact pressure is equal to the load on wheel divided by the contact area. contact pressure is found to be more than tire pressure when tire pressure is less than 7 kilogram per centimeter square and vice versa. Now let us get into the details. This is the relationship between tire and contact pressure. Observe this graph. Now the ratio of contact pressure to tire pressure is defined as the rigidity factor. If the tire pressure is 7 kilogram per centimeter square, if the tire pressure is 7 kilogram per centimeter square, the rigidity factor can be called as 1. For a tire pressure lower than 7 kilogram per centimeter square, the rigidity factor is greater than 1. And for tire pressure greater than 7 kilogram per centimeter square, the rigidity factor is less than 1. The rigidity factor depends on the degree of tension developed in the walls of the tires. The rigidity factor depends on the degree of tension developed in the walls of the tire. Now, next concept is the equivalent single wheel load. We have discussed about the contact tire pressure. We have discussed about the maximum wheel load. The next important concept which we have to study is the equivalent single wheel load, or the ESWL. Let us see what is this equivalent single wheel load. Equivalent single wheel load is the single wheel load producing the same value of maximum stress or maximum strain at the depth Z as that of a dual wheel assembly. Okay, you have a dual wheel assembly. You have a dual wheel assembly, and how much is the load produced due to that dual wheel load assembly? You are having a equivalent single wheel load. Okay, you are having a dual wheel assembly. Dual wheel assembly means there is an axle, and at both ends of the axle you will be having two tires or two wheels. So due to the dual wheel assembly, how much load is produced? You know, okay. You want a single wheel load. Okay, actually that single wheel load you are calling as equivalent because it is made equivalent to the single wheel load should be, it should not, it may or may not be equal, but it is equivalent to the dual wheel load assembly. Okay. So equivalent single wheel load is the single wheel load producing the same value of maximum stress or maximum strain at the depth Z as that of a dual wheel assembly. What is the effect produced by a dual wheel assembly? For producing the same effect, you are selecting a equivalent single wheel load which is capable of producing the same effect, as the single wheel load. Continue. Now let us observe this figure. Here you are having two tires. These two tires are spaced at a distance of D, and they are having a center to center spacing of S. 2A is the radius of these, 2A is the diameter of this tire. Now when you consider the effect due to these tires, you can observe here that up to a depth of D by 2. I'll explain once more. You are having two tires. The two tires are spaced at D distance apart, and the center to center distance between the two tires is given as 2S, right? And 2A is the of the tire. Now when you consider the effect of this tire on the lowermost layers, consider this strata, lower strata. Up to a depth of D by 2 from the surface, there is no overlapping of pressure or stress due to both these tires. that is given up to a depth d2, sorry, up to a depth d by 2, each wheel load acts independently. See, the effect due to this wheel load is like this and this wheel load is like this. There is no overlapping or crossing of the stress. Now, after the point, after depth d by 2, after depth d by 2 means this portion. Here you can see that this line shows the stress distribution due to this wheel, and here there is a line which is denoting the stress distribution due to the other load. So after a depth d by 2, you can see that the stresses are being overlapped. Now, when you take a greater depth in the sense depth greater than 2s, the stresses induced are due to the effect of both wheel, as the area overlap is considerable. Okay, I'll explain once more. Up to a depth of d by 2, you will be having you will be having the stress distribution as independent. There is no overlap. There is no overlap between the stresses due to both the tires. After a depth of d by 2, you can see that there is overlap. The stresses produced by both the wheels will be overlapping. And after you cross the depth of 2s, the effect or the stresses induced are due to the effect of both wheels. Okay. So the total stresses due to dual wheels at any depth greater than 2s is considered to be equivalent to a single wheel load of magnitude 2p. Which means that up to a depth of d by 2, the effect is only due to single wheel load, that is P and P. From d by 2 to 2s, you have a combined effect, and the combined effect is due to the single wheel load P and the combined wheel load of 2P. So the value of stress coming in that particular range, or the range of value of stress coming in that particular location, that is between the depth d by 2 to 2s, will be something between P and 2P. And when you cross the depth 2s, you can observe that the value of stress will be equivalent to 2P. Is that clear? Now, let us see again. Okay, so the equivalent single wheel load can be given as log 10 of equivalent single wheel load is equal to log P, where P is the single load, log P plus 0.301 log Z by d by 2 by log 2s by d by 2. Of course, this formula is not needed. Just I'll show you graphically. If you want to interpolate, I told you that up to a depth of d by 2, you will be having effect due to a single wheel load. And after a depth of 2s, you will be having effect due to 2p, that is the dual wheel. And between d by 2 and 2s is your problem area where you don't know what is the value. To get the stress value corresponding to the range of d by 2 to 2s, you have to go for interpolation. Okay. Now please observe this diagram. I'll show you one graphical representation. Here I have a log graph. On the x-axis I have given the depth on log scale, and on the y-axis I have given the equivalent single wheel load on log scale. Both are given in log scale. At a depth of z is equal to d by 2. What is z? Z is the depth at which you are considering the vertical stresses. At a depth of z is equal to d by 2. The equivalent single wheel load is given as P. At a depth of z is equal to 2s, the equivalent single wheel load is given as 2P. Now this is our crisis area between z is equal to d by 2 and z is equal to 2s. It will take a load between P and 2P. So if Z1 is the depth, on the log scale, you are taking this point Z1, and from Z1 you are erecting a perpendicular to the curve, and from this perpendicular you are drawing a bisector to the y-axis. You will get one value corresponding to P1. This is how you interpolate for any intermediate depth. You want to get the stress value for any intermediate depth, so you can go for an interpolation like this. I hope it is clear. So that is how you can determine the graphical, this is the graphical method. Next important factor is the repetition of loads. Whenever you are speaking about the deformation of pavements, you should understand that a pavement will not be getting deformed only after the application of a load only for a single time. If the load is continuously getting applied, then only there is chance for pavement failure. So repetition of loads is one important factor which you need to consider. If the pavement fails with N1 number of repetitions of P1 kilogram load, okay, you are repeating a load of P1 for N1 times, and similarly you are repeating a different load of P2 for N2 number of repetition. So then you can write P1 N1 is equal to P2 N2. If a pavement is found to fail with N1 repetition of P1 load and N2 repetition of P2 load can also cause failure to the same pavement surface, then you can write P1 N1 is equal to P2 N2. The pavement thickness is designed for 1 million load repetition during the life of pavement. Okay, it is not like once or twice if the load is repeated, the pavement will be failing. It is designed for 1 million load repetition. That is why if properly constructed, a pavement will be having certain amount of service life. It is not like you are constructing the pavement today. I'm emphasizing the word of proper, right? Otherwise, it may happen that due to faulty construction, the pavement may be failing very soon. But if the pavement is constructed or well designed, then it is designed for 1 million load repetition. For one load application, the pavement thickness required is only 1/4 of the pavement thickness required, designed for, that point is not needed. Now, equivalent wheel load factor can be given as load P1 is equal to P1 by P whole raised to 4, where P is the standard load. So that is about the wheel load or design load. Now, other than the design load, another factor which is deciding the design of pavement is the environmental factor. What is the variation in moisture content? What is the variation in temperature? And what is the frost action? Frost action. What do you mean by frost action? If water is getting trapped in the pores, at a fall in temperature, there is a chance that water may be getting solidified and forming ice. This ice will exert a pressure. Ice will be larger in volume and that will exert a pressure over the pavement surface. So that is the frost action. So moisture condition, temperature and frost action are different environmental factors which need to be considered. Now let us see what are the reasons for variation in moisture content. The variation in moisture content depends on climatic condition due to rainfall and all. Drainage condition. If there is no proper drainage, there is a chance of water logging which will result in the reduced pavement quality. Then fluctuation of groundwater table. Then the moisture movement caused by capillary action and vapor movement. Then swelling and shrinkage of subgrade soil with variation in moisture may cause failure to the pavement. Swelling and shrinkage of subgrade soil with variation in moisture. Now, adverse effect due to frost heave, frost melting or thaw and the alternate cycles of freezing and thawing. I told you about frost heave and all. As temperature decreases, ice crystals in the subgrade soil grows further and results in raising of pavement called frost heave. Subsequently, increase in temperature result in melting or thawing of frozen ice crystals. Now, variation in temperature. If the temperature is having very large variation due to climatic change, it may cause damage to the pavements. The bituminous pavement will become soft in hot weather and brittle in cold weather. High temperature stresses in cement concrete pavement causes warping of pavements. If high temperature stresses are developed, no need to worry. Such temperature stresses and all we'll be discussing in detail when we go into the rigid pavements chapter. Okay. So best here the only thing, basic thing you have to understand is about the different factors. What are the different factors affecting the pavement design, especially the design load. Okay. Regarding temperature stresses, warping and all, we'll discuss in the next class. Not in the next class, we'll discuss when we are studying about the rigid pavement. Okay. So we'll stop for today.